Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I'm back at my parents' place after enduring a 2 hour long traffic jam, so I think I'm entitled to a bit of EXO. Hmm. It's New Year's Eve anyway, so what is New Year's Eve without a bit of indulgence? Hmm. Mind you, this wouldn't be acceptable in just about any culture, drinking at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. But hey, um, to a Chinaman, any time of the day is a good time for EXO. Okay. All right. Yeah. This is my room. Uh, back in my parents' place. It's kept nice and tidy, just for me, and I can come back pretty much any damn time I like, really. But most of my work is in Subang, which is in the other side of town. So I spend most of my time there. Uh, so all right. Today's topic is going to be the difference between an individualist culture and a collectivist culture. Right. There seems to be a very common stereotype in the Western countries, namely America, that Asian people are um, conformists, right? That they don't, they conform to every single social norm, and the stereotype of them playing the viola, getting good grades at school, um, doing their homework, and staying out of trouble seems to be by and large a an American creation. Because let me tell you something, Asians are no more or less conformist than any other race on the planet, be it whites, Africans, Middle Easterners, what have you. Because people fundamentally confuse the meaning of collectivism and conformity. They think they are synonyms, but they're really, really not. Okay, I'll give you an example. I receive quite a lot of flack on this channel for saying that when you marry a Chinese lady, a traditional Chinese lady, not a modern Chinese lady, yeah, not necessarily a modern Chinese lady, a traditional Chinese lady, or traditional Chinese man, you not only marry the person, you marry their brother, you marry their sister, you marry their father, you marry their mother. Not in a biological sense, of course, but in a spiritual sense. That means when you marry a Chinese person, a traditional Chinese person who follows traditional Chinese culture, you merge into their family and you become a part of their family. So that's why I've said that if you don't like Asian guys, you like Asian women, that's your right. And, you know, I'm not saying you shouldn't go after Asian women, but I think a westernized one would be better for you than a traditional one. Because if you marry a traditional Asian woman, you're going to be seeing a lot of me. Not me personally, but a lot of. If she has a brother, you're going to be seeing a lot of her brother. Because family cohesion is very, very, very important in Asian culture. You know? Excuse me. So, in fact, it's so important that even if two people, if I was living under the same roof as my parents, mm, if we were going to go for dinner, my father would prefer that we go in the same car. Family harmony, rather than mm, if I were to say, like, oh, all right, I'll meet you guys for dinner. You guys go first, and I'll come join you guys later, or I'll meet you guys at a restaurant. Or I'll take my own car. My father would not like that, because that's the idea of one unified family unit doing everything in unison is what drives our culture, right? The same cannot be said of the West, which I think is a lot more individualistic. When we say individualistic, when I don't mean rebellious. What I mean is that the culture is centered less on the collective and more on the individual, right? At an extreme, you have American free market capitalism, which is the epitome of individualistic culture. That means my business is my business, your business is your business, and you know, uh, whatever whatever happens to you is none of my business because basically I'm the center of my own universe, and am I'm responsible for myself and nobody else, and the same goes for everybody else. Everyone is his own island. Every man is his own island. That's basically individualism on steroids, right? Individuality on steroids. Mm. Uh, but a more moderate individualist, Western individualist, might not think that way. He might certainly consider that he has social obligations to be paid, like the obligation, for example, for the rich to look after the poor. Now, someone like Bernie Sanders, for example, might not be a total, absolute individualist. Like, you know, doesn't make him a communist either. It's just that Americans are so obsessed with individualism that anything that involves contributing to the public good is considered communism in America, at least the far right circles. Mm. So, but in a Western culture, generally speaking, when you marry someone, you don't need to marry the family as well. Um, because the husband and wife are two individual units. The family is secondary, right? Once they get together as a nuclear family, they start their own family. Uh, the parents are important, but not as important. The relatives are not as important as it is in an Asian family unit. In an Asian family unit, you marry the family, no, you marry someone, you also marry the family. So I think that leads to quite a bit of frustration, in some men from a non-Asian culture who think, all right, well, I like Asian women. I like the aesthetic of Asian women, so I'll just get myself an Asian girlfriend. Not realizing that there are a lot of things about Asian culture they might be incompatible with, right? Not realizing that she's planning to bring the family to stay with them. And realizing that a little bit too late when the ring has already gone around her, ring finger. Mm. Mm. So, um, when you contract friendship with someone as well, in a Western culture, it's generally a matter of a friendship, if you will, a contract between two individuals, right? Two people. I could be wrong, so just correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, I spent 4 years in Australia, but that doesn't mean that I'm an expert on Western culture by any stretch. Um, when you contract friendship with someone, it's generally a between mano e mano, in the sense that it's a man-to-man sort of affair, right? Wife and children don't really play that important of a role, right? Um, because in when we, as I say, in the culture of individualism, you are an individual, your friend is also an individual, and your wife and children, the wife and children do not determine whether two individuals can be friends. But in an Asian culture, which is more collectivist, it's usually not easy to contract friendship with someone if you don't like their children or you don't like their wife, for example. Because when you contract friendship with someone, with a person, an Asian person, you also contract friendship with the wife and children by extension, right? Uh, like in a Western culture, it's not really the same. Like the children, um, Like you don't have to like someone's children to contract a friendship with that person. But in an Asian culture, it is difficult to contract friendship with someone because the friends and family are also considered an extension of that person. I don't know if I'm doing a very good job explaining this, but just like children are like an extension of their parents, right? Uh, does that make sense? Perhaps it may seem a little bit nebulous. My explanation may seem a little bit nebulous, and to me it makes sense, but to you it might not. So, um, let's say you don't like somebody's brother, or you don't like somebody's sister, you don't like somebody's children, or his wife, or his girlfriend. That person would not, a traditional Asian person would find it difficult to contract friendship with you because their immediate family and um, their their close friends as well are an extension of that person. Just like if let's say an Asian, for a traditional Asian, if our parents did not approve of someone, let's say my mother didn't approve of someone, of a woman, I would not go out with her. No matter how much I like this person, I would find someone else. Now, from a Western point of view, you might think, oh, that means your parents still own you in Asian culture. You can't think for yourself. You can't be your own individual. You're still dependent. You haven't cut the apron string, so to speak. You're still dependent on your parents, and that is a very, very Western way of looking at it. But that's not really the case, because I'll just tell you a story. Like, it might not appeal to your Western sensitivities, right? But in China, this is a fable about filial piety, right? A man and his son and his mother were living in a very poor family, and they were starving, right? They were all starving, and there was only enough food to feed two mouths. One mouth had to go, right? So the man and his wife decided very, very reluctantly that they would have to sacrifice their son, their little toddler son, in order to preserve the life of the man's mother, right? Now, so the man takes this boy far away to the cold mountains and is about to bury him alive, right? And he starts digging in the snow and he finds a big, big block of gold because the gods had decided to reward this man, right? They decided to reward this man for his filial piety, for placing the life of his mother before his son. Because you can always have more children in future, but you cannot have another mother. You cannot replace your mother, you can always replace your son. Gosh, sounds a little bit, that sounds a bit careless. But okay, well, look, in the Abrahamic culture, Abraham, God's favorite, God's favorite employee, is also tasked. He's given a test. He's asked by God to sacrifice his son, right? Isaac. So he takes Isaac up the mountain and he's about to do the deed when God suddenly stops him halfway and says, "It was a prank, bro." So, yes, you may think that our culture is very hard-hearted, very, very cold-hearted. But at the same time, it's not like your culture is perfectly, it's not as if people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Because the idea is that your parents raised you from this size till you were this size. So you are heavily indebted to your parents. You can always replace your children in the worst case scenario, but you cannot replace your parents. That's basically the idea in Confucian culture, right? One of the disciples of Confucius actually, he said once that he actually said that, I don't see the point in mourning our late parents for more than 3 months. I think that 3 months should be sufficient, because the idea behind Confucian culture, Confucius said that we should mourn our parents for no less than 3 years, right? For 3 years, we should only eat coarse grains and wear uh, a frumpy, raggy clothing. So one of Confucius's disciples says that doesn't make sense. That's not practical. So Confucius got very angry and he said, "Curse him! Curse this disciple of mine." Did his parents only raise him for 3 months? They raised him for far more than 3 years. So 3 years is the bare minimum you can raise. You can mourn your parents, um, after they've passed away. So, filial piety is a very, very, very central theme of Confucian culture. But most important of all is the idea of unity, right? Like, in order for a country to be in order, the family must first be in order. If the family is dysfunctional and disunited, then macrocosmically, the country cannot be in order if individual families themselves are not in order. So family values are very, very important in Confucian culture. So I hope at the end of this video, I hope it's understood that, collectivism does not mean conformity. It's not the same as conformity, right? At its utter extreme, collectivism was also applied on families. Like the legalist scholar Han Fei said that in order to deter people from committing crimes, families should be punished collectively. So all the way from the third generation all the way to the first gets their head cut off, for doing something wrong, like treason against the state, for example. Of course, Confucius was against that because Confucius was against the death penalty. He was in fact against corporal punishment. Confucius' idea was that we should reform criminals, not punish them, because if you punish people, it makes people angry, but it doesn't instill in people a sense of shame. But if we inspire a sense of shame in the criminal, we teach them to see the error in their ways, then they will naturally change their behavior. Because the core ethos of Confucian philosophy is that everybody is born good. While the core ethos of legalist philosophy, legalism came about 200 years after Confucianism, is that everybody is born bad. Everybody works in the interest of self-interest. So harsh punishments are necessary to keep the nation in order. And collective punishment is a good deterrent, according to Han Fei, because you may not value your life personally, but because of the collective nature of Chinese society, you have strong bonds to your family, right? You have strong bonds to your family. So if your children or your parents or your grandparents are going to incur the same kind of punishment as you, then you think twice before committing a crime. Now, it seems cruel, but it actually makes logical sense from a Machiavellian perspective. Okay, I hope that it's understood by this point that collectivism is not it doesn't mean the same thing as individualism. It doesn't mean the same thing as conformity. So yeah. All right, guys. Happy New Year, and I hope that you've learned something. It doesn't mean that you have to adopt my culture. I'm just saying, I'm trying to explain that agents are not naturally conformists. Collectivism and conformity are not the same thing. Thank you.